On the fateful day of March 25, 2025, the quiet streets of Wilson, North Carolina took a horrifying turn. A woman and her entire family would be shot dead by her son moments after his jail release party. The Wilson police responded to an emergency call from a residence on the 1700 block of Snowden Drive, Wilson, North Carolina, but nothing could have prepared them for the grim discovery waiting for them. In the home was the lifeless body of a 50-year-old woman. But just when investigators thought it couldn't get any chilling, they would find multiple other bodies shot dead too. What shocked the investigators even more was that the perpetrator was none other than the very son the family had been celebrating his release from jail just days before. This is the tragic life and death of Dana Jenkins and her son. Much love. Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video, drop a comment, and please subscribe to Viral Crime Stories. Let's go back to the story. 50-year-old Dana Vanessa Jenkins, born on April 3, 1974, was a beloved and dedicated mother in her Wilson, North Carolina community. Known for her radiant smile and unwavering faith, Dana was the cornerstone of her family. If that don't work, he'll leave. She was a devoted member of Mount Moriah Community Church, where she not only worshiped but also dedicated her time and energy to helping others. Dana was described by those who knew her as compassionate, dependable, and deeply rooted in her values. But above all, she was a mother. She was a mother to two sons, 25-year-old Daryn and 15-year-old Daryn Cox. Her life revolved around her children, and her commitment to them was evident in everything she did. She worked hard to create a stable and nurturing environment for her family, holding down a job while also being an active participant in her church's community. Sadly, it would be the one she loved most that would take everything from her. She took great pride in her children's education and personal development, constantly working to ensure they had the opportunities she never had. Dana was especially proud of Daryn, her youngest son. He was a soft-spoken, respectful high school student at Bedingfield High School, where he excelled academically and was an active member of the church's media and music ministry. Daryn operated sound equipment and played music during church services. His teachers described him as thoughtful, always willing to help others, and quick to lend a hand. Dana's unwavering love and support for Daryn were evident in every aspect of her life, and she had high hopes of seeing him grow into a successful young man, a success that she believed was within his grasp. However, life for Dana was not always smooth sailing. Her eldest son, Don, had a much more tumultuous path. At the age of 25, Daryn had faced numerous legal troubles throughout his life. A string of offenses, including breaking and entering, firearm theft, and malicious conduct, had caused much strife in the family. Dana had always tried to be there for him, offering love, structure, and forgiveness despite the challenges he brought to the family. Her faith was unshaken, and she continued to believe that Daryn could turn his life around. She kept the faith, praying that one day he'd make better choices, leave his troubled past behind, and live a life that would make her proud. But despite the turmoil, Dana's commitment to her son never wavered. Court records show that in 2021, Daryn was sentenced to just over 3 years in prison for a string of other offenses, including breaking and entering and larceny. But during that time, Dana never gave up on her son. She visited him regularly, prayed for him, and often spoke about the day he'd come home and start fresh. She was always optimistic that one day Daryn would return and embrace the second chance she knew he needed. She saw the potential in him despite everything he had done wrong. It was with immense relief and hope that Dana finally received the news she had been waiting for. On March 25, 2025, her prayers seemed to have been answered. Daryn was granted early release from prison under a standard 9-month post-release supervision program. Dana, filled with joy, posted a celebratory message on Facebook that same afternoon, marking the return of her eldest son. If only she knew that day would bring more pain than happiness. For Dana, this was not just a moment of celebration. It was the beginning of a new chapter for her family. A chapter that she had been dreaming of for years. A chapter where her son would finally put his troubled past behind him and start anew. She believed that all the struggles they had faced in the past were now behind them. With Don home, Dana envisioned a life full of healing, reconciliation, and a brighter future for her children. But little did she know these celebrations would become a tragic day in their lives. That day, Dana's family and friends rallied around her, showing their support. She was swamped with heartfelt messages from friends, relatives, and church members, all expressing joy for her and her family's reunion. But days later, nothing could have prepared the Wilson community for what was about to happen. The evening of March 31st began like any other, but at around 5:23 p.m., the peace of the quiet neighborhood was shattered. Wilson police responded to an emergency call from the Jenkins residence. It was not unusual for families to gather on weekends or evenings, but this call would bring officers to a scene no one could have predicted. When police arrived at the house, they were met with a gruesome discovery. Dana was found lying lifeless in a pool of her own blood in the living room, and just a few feet away, Daryn's body was found, also brutally stabbed multiple times. The house, once filled with love and celebration, was now the scene of a chilling crime. The investigators quickly recognized that this was not a random act of violence. It was personal, and the attack was brutal. The police began to work quickly, piecing together the evidence and talking to witnesses, but this was only the beginning of the tragedy. Upon entering the house, officers observed signs of a violent struggle. Blood was trailed across the living room floor, and the scene was chaotic, but not the aftermath of a shooting, as some may have expected. It was clear that the victims had been stabbed. The police immediately called in detectives to investigate the grisly scene. What was soon uncovered was chilling. The mother and son were killed by the very person Dana had been celebrating just days before, her eldest son, Don. At the scene, police found Don himself. He was detained without incident and appeared at first to be in shock. He had a bandaged hand, which seemed suspicious and supported the belief investigators had that he was involved in what may have happened. Daryn did not resist arrest and was taken into custody without much opposition, police identifying the victims as 50-year-old Dana Jenkins and her 15-year-old son, Daryn Cox. Jenkins' 25-year-old son, Daryn Jenkins, is now charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Authorities were left grappling with the stark reality that Don, who had just been released from prison, was allegedly responsible for the deaths of his own mother and younger brother. Investigators would discover chilling details. Autopsy reports showed that both Dana and Daryn had been stabbed multiple times. Dana's injuries were concentrated in her upper chest and abdomen, while Daryn's wounds were more defensive in nature, suggesting that he had fought back before the fatal blow struck his neck. The positioning of Daryn's body suggested that he may have attempted to flee, but he was tragically ambushed.
She was a very sweet person. Always smile. I can see her smile right now.
But Daryn's behavior prior to the killings raised suspicions. You can just see he was so fidget. He was so anxious. He could not stay still. He had that sneakiness about him. You know what I mean? Like a crazy person trying to get ready to do something like premeditation. Detectives found disturbing messages on his social media where he had expressed feelings of paranoia, betrayal, and emotional instability. He had been struggling mentally and emotionally and was having trouble adjusting to life after his release from prison. The police also gathered surveillance footage from neighbors' security cameras, which held Dear Don pacing on the porch hours before the murders, muttering to himself and looking visibly distressed. The evidence pointed to a premeditated attack, and the authorities soon gathered more pieces of the puzzle. Daryn had been struggling with mental health issues, but his violent actions shocked everyone who had been rooting for his recovery.
They loved each other. They loved us. We loved them, especially Daryn. He meant the world to all of us. Our teens here, they're grieving heavily.
His social media posts, combined with the physical evidence found at the scene, painted a clear picture. Daryn had snapped under the pressure, and in a fit of rage, he killed the 2 people who had loved him most. Don was taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for the death of his mother, Dana, and the other for the death of his younger brother, Daryn. Don was held without bond. He was processed at the Wilson County Jail, and authorities took steps to ensure a thorough investigation into his mental state, the circumstances of his release from prison, and whether the lack of post-incarceration support had contributed to his violent actions. As investigators began piecing together the events of that tragic afternoon, the timeline started to unfold. Blood spatter. Analysis and fingerprint collection led them to discover that a kitchen knife, likely from Dana's own kitchen, had been used in the attack. The crime scene was a chaotic, brutal reminder of the deeply personal nature of the murders. The more the investigators dug into Don's background, the more unsettling it became. Don had been released from prison just 6 days earlier after serving time for various offenses, including breaking and entering and firearms theft. Although his release should have been a cause for optimism and hope for a fresh start, his behavior suggested otherwise. Police found disturbing messages on his social media indicating that he had been struggling mentally and emotionally. His erratic behavior, the disturbing signs of paranoia, and the unsettling messages he had sent to friends and family painted a clear picture of someone on the edge, unable to cope with the pressures of his life. As the news spread, Dana and Daryn's family, friends, and the entire Wilson community were left in a state of disbelief. How could this happen? Dana, who had spent her life selflessly caring for her family and her community, was gone in the most horrific way. Her friends and family described her as the pillar of strength and a source of comfort to those around her. In the wake of her death, the loss was felt deeply by all who knew her. But for some, it was the tragedy of losing both Dana and Daryn that seemed most incomprehensible. Soon, Daryn Jenkins made his first court appearance. On April 2, 2025, just days after his arrest, Daryn appeared in court wearing an orange jumpsuit and still bandaged on one hand, and stood before the judge. The gravity of the charges against him, 2 counts of first-degree murder, was unmistakable. The prosecution argued that the murders were deliberate, brutal, and premeditated. They pointed to the fact that Daryn had not only murdered his mother and brother, but had also remained at the scene without calling for help. His actions, according to the prosecution, were indicative of a calculated and intentional attack. The defense, however, raised concerns about Don's mental health. They suggested that his actions might have been driven by untreated psychiatric issues. They requested a psychiatric evaluation, hinting that Daryn's unstable mental state at the time of the murders could have contributed to his actions. The judge, however, proceeded with the charges, and Daryn remained held by on a combined bond of $2.5 million, $500,000 for the murder of Dana, and $1 million for the death of Daryn. Autopsy reports added another layer to the tragedy of the case. Dana had been stabbed multiple times in the upper chest and abdomen, while Daryn had defensive wounds on his arms and hands, indicating that he had fought for his life. The positioning of Daryn's body suggested that he may have attempted to flee, but he was tragically ambushed. As the case progressed, Daryn's past convictions came under scrutiny. Court records revealed that he had prior convictions, including violations of protection orders and malicious conduct while incarcerated. These past actions, combined with the brutal nature of the MS, made it clear that Daryn had a long history of troubling behavior. For many in the community, the question remained, why had he been released so soon? By early June 2025, Daryn Jenkins was deemed competent to stand trial following a psychological evaluation. The court swiftly scheduled a preliminary hearing, and prosecutors made it clear they would push for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Legal analysts began weighing in on the case, pointing to the state's potential focus on Dion's criminal history, the brutality of the murders, and his lack of remorse in the aftermath of the crime. On the other side, public defenders suggested they might argue diminished capacity, claiming that untreated mental health issues and systemic neglect played a significant role in his actions. The tension between these opposing strategies set the stage for a high-stakes legal battle. In the wake of Dana and Daryn's tragic deaths, the Jenkins family, along with concerned members of the Wilson community, began advocating for legislative reform. Many questioned why Daryn had been released from prison just days before the murders, without adequate mental health screenings or support systems in place. Had there been more structure to his post-release plan, could this tragedy have been prevented? In response to the public outcry, North Carolina's Department of Public Safety came under scrutiny for its handling of parole procedures. State representatives took notice of the situation, and in July 2025 passed a bipartisan bill that became known as Dana's Law. The law mandated enhanced post-release, monitoring for violent felons, mandatory psychiatric screening before parole, and community readiness assessments. This new law aimed to address the gaps in the parole system, ensuring that those with a history of mental health issues or violent behavior receive the care and support they need before reintegrating into society. Dana's Law passed with overwhelming support, signaling a commitment to preventing future tragedies like the one that claimed Dana and Daryn's lives. While legislative reforms were crucial, the Wilson community also took action at the local level to address the needs of individuals re-entering society after incarceration. Several community organizations and churches began piloting programs to offer support to families welcoming home formerly incarcerated loved ones. These programs aim to reduce the isolation that often accompanies re-entry and provide practical assistance to those trying to rebuild their lives. One such program, led by a local nonprofit, involved regular home visits by trained community liaison, many of whom were formerly incarcerated themselves. The goal was to create a bridge between returning citizens and supportive services such as job training, mental health counseling, and family support programs. These programs were designed to help individuals transition more smoothly into society, offering the kind of support that Daryn Jenkins had lacked after his release. Churches in the area also partnered with therapists to offer free trauma counseling sessions for families dealing with the complex emotional challenges of re-entry. By providing these services, the community hoped to reduce the risk of violence and mental health crises that could result from the lack of support. The tragic murders of Dana and Daryn Jenkins served as a stark reminder of the importance of addressing the mental health needs of individuals re-entering society, as well as the importance of having a strong support system in place for families. On April 13, 2025, a joint funeral was held at Mount Moriah Church in Wilson to honor Dana and Daryn Jenkins. The service was a tear-filled and powerful tribute to two lives taken too soon. The church was packed with mourners, many wearing white ribbons to symbolize peace. Dana was remembered not just as a mother, but as a caregiver and a mentor who had spent years uplifting those around her. Family and friends described her as the glue that held everyone together. Daryn, just 15 years old, was remembered as a young man with so much potential who had been active in youth sports and had dreams of becoming a chef. His classmates from Bedingfield High School attended the service, many of them in tears as they said goodbye to their friend. The funeral brought some closure, but it also stirred unresolved questions. How could this happen? What had pushed Daryn over the edge? The murder of Daryn and Dana Jenkins raised critical questions about the flaws in the criminal justice system and the mental health services available to individuals being released from prison. Could more have been done to help Daryn Jenkins? Could better mental health support have prevented this tragedy? And perhaps most importantly, what can we do as a society to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future? The Jenkins family's call for change was not just about seeking justice for Dan and Daryn. It was about ensuring that no other family would have to endure the same pain. By advocating for legislative reforms and supporting programs for families affected by incarceration, the community is working towards a future where tragedies like this are less likely to occur. In the months that followed, the Jenkins family story became a catalyst for change, and Dana's Law stood as a testament to their unwavering commitment to making a difference. Though nothing could bring Dana and Daryn back, their legacy lives on in the fight for justice and reform. In Dana and Daryn's memory, let us continue to raise awareness, support those in need, and work towards a safer, more compassionate community. If you found the story thought-provoking, please like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Viral Crime Stories for more stories like this. What do you think about it? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story intriguing, please like and share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.